Hello and welcome to World Storytelling Cafe. My name is Ellen Sjömålen and I am a Swedish storyteller. I work at a place called the Land of Legends, and that is also a region here in Sweden where we have a lot of stories and also a lot of storytellers. And I hope to bring you along for a little ride through the Land of Legends today. But to do that, we must start from the beginning. You see, the devil was once an angel. He lived up in heaven with God and all the other angels. But one day, God grew tired of the devil and all of his misdeeds, so the devil was told to leave heaven and bring with him all of his bad spirits. And it is said that they rained down on earth like raindrops for 3 days and 3 nights. Those who fell by our houses became the gnomes and the tomte and the vette, creatures taking care of our houses. Some landed in the forests, becoming the trolls and the maiden of the forest, skogsrået. Some ended up in the mountains, becoming the giants, and some landed in our lakes and rivers, becoming the Nik, Näcken and other water spirits. And it must have rained a lot here in Sweden and a lot here where I live, because we have so many beings and creatures to tell about. And one of them, like I mentioned, was the trolls. And when I say troll, I believe that each and every one of you listening right now have your own idea of how a troll should look like. If you, like me, you were a child during the 90s, maybe you remember the little trolls in plastic with funny hair colors that you would put on top of your pencils. Yeah. Or maybe you think about the beautiful paintings by John Bauer, where trolls have big noses and big ears. Or maybe you're a bit younger, and for you a troll is these rolling rocks that appear in the movie Frozen. Well, trolls, they really get our imagination going. But if you go back in time, just 100 and 150 years here in Sweden, the belief in trolls were real. It was something people lived with every day, and they were not believed always to be ugly or strange. They could look a bit abnormal, or they could be really, really beautiful, and you'd look just like you and me. The only difference could be that a troll would have a tail. So of course humans figured out ways to protect themselves. You could, like I am today, wear a troll cross around your neck. You see here, you have the cross symbol, and it's also made of metal. And trolls, they hate the cold steel. But you see, as adults, of course we should beware, but those who should be really, really careful about trolls were the young ones, the newborns, because trolls, they like newborns. They would sneak into the cottage and steal the newborn baby and put in its stead a troll child. So of course a mother would have to take precaution. She could put pieces or pages from the Bible under the mattress. She could also put a shredded snakeskin under the threshold of the house to keep it away. But she could also put the cold steel, like a scissor of some sort, underneath the mattress as well. But as it goes, not all mothers were as cautious, and this tale is about one of those mothers. You see, once upon a time, it was a mother who had just had a baby boy. And one day she thought that something strange must have happened during the nighttime, because the boy would not stop eating. He had drank all the milk in her breasts, he had eaten all the butter and all the bread and all the meat, and now there was nothing left. So the woman went home to her grandmother and asked her for advice. And the grandmother, who knew a lot about trolls and other critters, she told her granddaughter, that I believe, my child, that you have yourself a troll in your cradle. And to get the troll to disappear, you have to make it reveal itself. You have to make it speak. Because even though they may look small, they speak the language of us humans. So the mother, she went home with a plan. She cracked an egg in half and took the eggshell and poured cream into the shell. And then she took a little stick and started stirring. And I think that you guys know what happens when you stir butter or milk or cream for too long. Well, you end up with butter. So she took the butter and showed it to the baby troll and said, "Here, my child, I have made butter for an entire week." But the troll, he just looked at the human mother and thought, "I'm going to starve to death in here. I need to say something." So he stood up on his chubby little legs and he put his chubby little arms in the side and he said, "You know what? I lived a long life. I've seen the forest grow up and be cut down 3 times, but I never seen a woman foolish enough to make butter in an eggshell." Now, my friends, she knew that was not her child, so she took the cradle and was just about to toss it into the fire when someone slammed the door to the cottage open. And there on the threshold stood the troll mother with her baby boy in her arms. And the troll mother was angry. She was screaming and cursing and telling the mother that she had been taking good care of her human boy in the mountains, but here she was about to burn her child alive. No, they would change. And so they did. And from that day on, the troll mother was never seen again. And I hope that the mother took precautions in the future and made sure to put something in the child's cradle. In Swedish, we actually have a name for these children that are put in this instead of a human child, and they are called bortbyting. Maybe you could translate it into something like a trade child. And that was actually a common belief when a child was born with some kind of deformity, or if it would scream a lot, or if it were really, really hungry, that you could accuse the child of being a bortbyting. Yeah. So, trolls, right? Strange creatures they are. But an even stranger one, and one that has caused fear in people in this region for many, many years, was the lind snake. It was believed that the lind snake was born when the tree lind became 100 years old. Then the snake would come out of the ground, and they looked a bit special because they had the head of the dragon. They had hair like a horse on its back, and it was 6 to 7 meters long with a brownish color. And when they awoken from the ground, they were so hungry that they would eat anything. And this is the tale about one of those times. You see, a young girl was out picking berries and collecting firewood when she saw something move between the trees. And when she looked closer, she could see that it was the lind snake. And she froze. And the lind snake, well, he turned around, faced the girl, looked her in her eyes and said, "I'm gonna eat you up." But the girl, of course, she was not interested in becoming the lind snake's breakfast. So she put her basket of berries down, looked the lind snake in his eyes and said, "Well, if you want to eat me, then you'll have to catch me." And then she ran, as quick as she could, away from the snake. And the snake, it just crawled after. And after a while, the snake grew tired of this. And he thought of a quicker way to catch the girl. He took his jaws and he bit himself in the tail and created a wheel. And then he rolled faster and faster and faster after the girl. And she looked back and she saw the snake coming, and she thought, well, my legs can't run any faster and my heart can't pound any harder. I need to save myself some other way. And then she saw it in the middle of the forest, a big, big rock. And she thought, maybe if I climb that rock, I will be safe for some time. So she used her last efforts and ran to the rock and climbed up. And there she saw the snake rolling faster and faster and faster. And the problem was that the snake, he didn't know what was up and what was down, what was ahead of him and what was back. He did not see the rock. So he rolled straight into the rock and burst into 1,000 pieces. And the girl, she saw this happen and she thought, well, maybe I can find myself a tiny piece of Lynn snake and take home to show my parents and my friends that I have been brave. But when she crawled down to have a look, the snake was gone. No pieces at all was left on the wood floor. And the girl, she had to go home without any proof of what she had done. But I will tell you what happened to the snake. You see, when something like this happens, the Lynn snake is really hard to kill. So when something like this would happen, the Lynn snake had a plan. All the small pieces went into the ground and moved in the ground to a new lind, a tiny one. And in the roots of that lind, it would then spend the next 100 years rebuilding itself. And then after 100 years, you know what happens. The snake emerges once more and continues to hunt. And I sometimes used to think that, of course, people didn't believe this. I mean, of course, this is a tale, but in fact, there are proof of people actually testimonies written down of really like prominent people in society, like a teacher and a priest, that say that they have really, really seen these snakes in the forest. So who knows? Maybe they are just hiding in linds all over Sweden, waiting to wake up again. Another creature that I mentioned in the first story about the raindrops was the giants. And now I know that no matter where in the world you are right now listening to me, you have stories about giants around you, because they exist in all cultures, in all oral traditions. We have giants, and here in Sweden we have them as well. And it just happens to be so that right outside of Ljungby, where I work, there was once a giant lady. She was taller than the tallest tree. And she had really, really big ears, a really big nose, a really big mouth. But giants, at least in these parts, had really, really, really small eyes. So when she was out walking, she didn't really see where she put her feet. And one day, she almost put her feet on these small, small little creatures on the ground. And when she looked down, she saw that they were moving quite funny, and she thought that they looked cute. So she picked them up, and she looked at them, and she said, well, how cute, maggots. Oh, little cute maggots. I will bring them home to my husband and show him. And so she went on home to her husband, and when she showed him the maggots, he looked at them closely. He had somewhat of a better eyesight than his wife, and when he saw them, he gasped, "Wife, those are not maggots. Those are humans. The humans that will inherit the earth after us giants. You need to put them back where you found them." So the giant woman had to go back and release the humans. And then I think that you know what happened. Yeah. The giants, they became fewer and fewer, and the humans became more and more and more, until we started to build churches. And by the churches, we had the tower for the bell. And when the bell rang on Sundays, the giants would cover their ears and scream, "Stop, stop!" But do you think the humans stopped with their ringing? Of course not. So the giants, they grow angrier and angrier, and they decided to destroy the church bells. So they took rocks, big rocks, and tossed them at the churches. But as you might remember, giants have really bad eyesight, so they missed every single time. That is why we here in Sweden have so many big rocks around our churches. But what did the giants do then? Well, they decided to move. They took their belongings, and some of them actually moved to Norway. Up in the Norwegian mountains, there are no churches, no people, so they get to be all alone. And it's actually said that they sleep under the Norwegian mountains, waiting for us humans to give back the earth to them. I've actually heard someone say that if you go to Norway on a skiing trip, you should put your ear against the mountain, and then you should hear the giants snore. But I don't know, I never tried it, but maybe you will someday. The creatures I've been talking about now, they are common for folk tales and legends. And the third one, or the fourth one, is a creature that when I tell these stories to children, they stop me, and sometimes afterwards they ask me, "But Ellen, werewolves, they are not a part of our folklore. They come from movies, from Hollywood." And then it's always nice to be able to tell them that, you know what, werewolves exist in many different traditions, and here in Sweden we actually have them in our folklore. They differ maybe from the werewolf tales down in Europe or in the UK, for example, but we have our own stories about werewolves. And therefore I thought I ought to share one with you now. Once upon a time, in a small town called Runkarp, there was a man and a woman. They lived together, happily married, but they were poor. And they had a small piece of land that was theirs. So each morning they would go out to work on that land. One day, after a couple of hours working in the sun, the husband started to act strange. He got an itch. First, his arms, then his neck, then his head, then his legs. And the wife looked at her husband and asked him, "What's wrong with you? Do you have lice or something?" But the man continued to itch. And he itched and he itched, and his eyes, they grew bigger and bigger and bigger. And then he looked at his wife and said, I think that I need to go out into the woods." The wife once more looked at her husband and said, "What's wrong with you? What are you talking about? Just go away. Go away for a while. Do you need to pee?" And the husband, he continued to itch, and he said, "When I'm gone, if a monster or something comes from the woods after you, you can't kill it. You have to promise me you can't kill it." And the wife, she looked once more at her husband, shook her head and said, of course, I promise that. Just go and pee or whatever you need to do." And he went into the forest. And the wife, she continued to work with her pitchfork. And after a while, she heard something in the forest. The cracking of branches, the moving of leaves. And when she looked up, she saw two big eyes staring back at her from the forest. And out jumped a beast, half man, half wolf. And it started to chase the woman. And she was terrified. She ran as fast as she could, but the wolf was faster. It caught up with her and a piece of her dress. The woman stopped, looked at a hole in her one and only dress, mind you, and she said, You beast, I'm gonna show you. And then she took the pitchfork, not the pointy end, because she remembered what her husband told her. No, she used the other end, and she started to punch the werewolf. And she was angry. She punched, and the wolf started to retreat. And she took one last blow and hit the wolf right between the eyes. And then the wolf just gave out a little cry like, ah! And disappeared into the forest again. But the wife, she was terrified, so she ran home, closed the door behind her, and she thought, I hope and pray that my husband will get home safe, because with that beast out there, you never know what's gonna happen. After a couple of hours, the door opened, and her husband, he stepped inside, and the wife, she ran up to him, she hugged him, and she kissed him, and she told him about the werewolf. And the husband, he listened, and he replied, What? Just like that, with his mouth open. And then she could see that between the teeth, he had pieces of fabric. Fabric from her dress. She knew now. She knew that the man she had married was a werewolf. And I think any normal woman would probably have run away or killed the man or done something more dramatic. But this woman, she knew how to save her husband. So she looked him in the eyes and said 3 times, Sven, are you the werewolf? Sven, are you the werewolf? Sven, are you the werewolf? Because Sven, that was the name of her husband. And when she had said that 3 times, the husband sighed. He removed the fabric pieces and he said, Yes, I was the werewolf. But now you have saved me and I will never be a werewolf again. Because you see, to save a werewolf from being just a werewolf, you need to say the person's given name, the christening name of some sort, together with the werewolf's name, and then say 3 times to free the person. Because usually you would become a werewolf through the magic of a witch, or if your mother had been outdoors in the forest pregnant with you alone, then the spirit of the werewolf could have entered the womb and entered the baby. So she saved her husband, and they lived happily ever after, I believe. Now this storytelling session is coming to an end, and I'm so happy that I've been able to share some stories with you, and I hope that you, wherever you are, that you're safe, that you're keeping yourself safe, and that you take care of others, because that is what we need right now. We need community, we need to take care of one another. And therefore, I thought I would end with a story that I actually heard for the first time from my big storytelling mentor, the storyteller Mikael Thomasson. And I don't know where he heard this story, maybe you know, but it goes like this. Once upon a time, there was a young girl who was the truth, and the truth had traveled from village to village, from country to country, seeking shelter, seeking companionship. But wherever she went, people chased her away, they turned her away, they slammed their doors. No one would let the truth enter. The girl was sad, but she struggled, she continued her journey until one day when she reached a small village. It was the same as before. She knocked and she asked for help, but no one would let her in. So she sat down by the side of the road, and for the first time in a really long time, she cried. And she cried. And after a while, she heard some kind of sound of hoofs on the cobblestone. And when she looked up, she saw the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. It was a unicorn. And on the unicorn sat a woman, dressed in white, fine armor, and with a golden crown on her head. And that woman looked so beautiful, and the truth was just about to ask her who she was when people opened their doors, they opened their windows, they sang, they shouted, "Welcome!" They ran out, they brought gifts, food. People were really celebrating the arrival of this strange woman. And when everything had calmed down, it was only the unicorn and the woman and the truth left on the street. And the truth finally dared to walk up to the woman. "I'm sorry, miss, but I must ask you, who are you? I see here that you are also a stranger to this town, and still people welcomes you. Me, they just turn away." The woman on the unicorn, she looked down at the girl, and she smiled, and she said, "I know who you are. You are the truth. I have been searching all over the world for you. I am the fairy tale. And I ask you, come with me, travel with me, because I need you." And the truth, she took the hand of the fairy tale, and together they continued their travels. And from that day on, wherever the fairy tale, the tale, the legend, the story goes, so goes the truth. Because in each and every one of those stories, there is a single, maybe just a single thread of truth for us to hold on to. And I think that we need that. Thank you for listening. And as we say in Swedish, snipp, snapp, snut, så var denna saga slut.
Young and old, you've been listening to a wonderful storyteller. And if you really liked it, if you've got a little money, doesn't have to be a lot. A little goes a long, long way, as they say. And you can afford it. Just pop it into the storyteller's hat, because right now they're not earning at all, so whatever you've got, it will be appreciated. And I'm sure you parents will have set a good example for your children. Oh, it's lovely. I'm only joking. But it will keep some of us going through this crisis. And those of you that are self-employed out there will know exactly what I mean, and you're probably exempt.